The reason I actually put them there is they're slightly different.
MySQL.
Did he mention MySQL as well?
Alright, let me put MySQL here.
That's the data. Yeah, very good. Got good memory. Right. With these ones here, they are front level, right? So they're just on basically the client machine. You can actually see the source code as well. If you click on edit, I think, and then you view source, you'll be able to see HTML, CSS. You can download it to your computer. You can manipulate it and use it in your own website, which is fine. With these technologies here, PHP and MySQL, that's when you really do the programming side. So all the stuff that I mentioned before, if you attend my other seminars, where I said the for loops, the if loops, and all that stuff, that comes in here. You could do a bit in JavaScript, but if you want to really do programming, you do it in there. That sits in the back end, that sits on the server. The reason why, for example, I was able to show you, because on the Joomla, it actually allows you to see that. It allows you to access that server, so then you can actually see all the code. You can see the PHP, you can see MySQL if you wanted to, through PHP MyAdmin. So that these are just slightly two different technologies. So that's front end, and that's the back end. Right? Now, I'm not going to be able to cover everything in like 5 minutes, so what I'm going to do is, if you already know a bit of programming already, I'm going to take you through the basics about PHP. Alright? So the first thing is, PHP is a scripting language, right? Which means basically it interprets line by line. You write it in English, pure English. And you can embed it in the other languages, so you can embed it into HTML, for example. So you might have a page which is called index. Index page is the first page that the server looks for. When it loads up, it looks for index.html. If it's not there, it's got PHP or whatever extension. Yeah? So assuming that we've got an Apache server and it's set up to accept PHP, it looks for that. And in here, you can have some HTML, and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then we want to sort of write some coding now. We want to add a bit of PHP. The way we do it, we do one of those, less than, then we put a question mark. And once we finish our code, we close it with, sorry, squiggly line, not a squiggly line, with one of those. Yeah? So every time, if you go to Joomla and you want to start playing around with the code a bit and you want to start modifying it, personalizing it to your own need, I mean, most of the stuff you can do it through their thing, but if you want to do something extra, something that isn't there, you can start playing around with the code. If it's PHP, you can play around with that side. Whatever's in that block, play around with it. And you can mix and match. So some of the codes, if you actually notice, you know, that was like an if condition somewhere here, and then after that goes back to HTML, and then it goes back into, to close the if condition, it goes back into PHP again. You can mix. Okay. Now, you guys are all familiar with Java and all these languages, right? Everyone knows? Yeah? What's a variable? Container, yeah? It holds some values. In most languages like Java, C++, you have to actually tell the variable if you want to hold a number, if you want to hold a string. Is that right? Yeah? Okay, cool. So you put like int x, for example, yeah? So you could say x will hold integer. In PHP, it's very, very useful, because what you can actually do to define a variable, all you do is put a $sign in front of the word that you want to create as a variable. So you want to say, for example, age. So you do that. Now that's basically a variable. What kind of variable is it? Is it a number? Is it going to hold numbers? Is it going to hold words? I'm going to write 18 or 10 to like TEN, or 10 as 10, 0. It's very flexible. In PHP it's flexible. You can hold both, and you can just swap around at any time. So I can actually assign a value here. I can say age equals, if it's a string, TEN, like that, and then I can change it if I want to. So all of a sudden I just change it and I make it into a number. So it's very dynamic. So that's the variables in PHP. So if you see these things, these basically mean variables. If you play around with Joomla, see that anything with $1 in front of it, it's a variable. And that makes life a lot easier. in programming, you've got four building blocks, four major building blocks. Like I said before, you've got the condition, which is if condition, and if goes in brackets. In this case, PHP, you put a variable, which is, say, for example, age. Oh, missed A, and age is less than, say, 18. That's basically how you would check. Usually, you need to define that somewhere, and say it's an integer. Here, you can just make it up. You don't have to mention it anywhere before. So that all of a sudden that's created. And oh, sorry, you have to actually say with this value. You have to give it a value, obviously. So we can say age here, 10. Yeah, and then so basically it checks if it's less than that age, and then it would execute. The same way you put the squiggly brackets, and then you could do something in here. It looks very familiar, isn't it? It looks exactly the same, in fact, except we're not actually giving this a type, a variable type. Because it just takes it and makes it instantaneously. So that's the if condition. And likewise, like I said before, you've got if what would you have? Your loops, yeah? And you've got for loop, for example, for loop would be something like $I equals 0, I less than 10, and then I plus plus. That looks like the for loop, doesn't it? But here we would have put like int I or something in Java or C++. And the same thing again, you've got the squiggly brackets, these things where you put the block. Just one line, you don't need these things, you can just write this, the statement just here. So that's the loop side. And likewise, you could pretty much guess everything else, the while loop, everything else. The big difference is just that variable. So I'm going to skip to switch. And switch is pretty much the same. If you know the syntax to switch, you would put switch, and then you put the variable in here, and then you put case 1, dot, whatever, break. Yeah, and then you've got the default as well. And then you put down here something, and then you put break, and then you close it. So that's the switch. So that's the third thing. And then the fourth is the exceptions. Who knows what exceptions are? I've mentioned it before. What's exceptions? Razan? What's exceptions?
If it doesn't have the function, then you just want to quit
like,
from
yeah,
that.
you want to try it. You want to try something first.
Yeah.
The other word for it is like error handling.
Yeah.
So you want to try something first. You want to try there's a database connection. Yes. No, there isn't a database connection. Catch the error and do something with the error. Maybe write to a file or do whatever. What more at that time? Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much the four building blocks. Exactly the same in all programming languages. You've got building blocks, and then obviously if it's object-oriented programming language, you've got the object-oriented concepts. PHP does have, in the newer versions, it does have the object-oriented side where you create objects, and it's pretty much very close to the other languages. Maybe you can have a day and go through PHP if you want. Depends. Yeah. You want to learn about PHP in more detail? Yeah. So that's just the basics. I'll just go through some basics. As soon as you see some of this stuff, when you're playing around with Joomla or any language, you can basically say, oh yeah, I understand what that's all about. So you get a little head start.